Who is Dermot Reeve?
Who? Oh. I've always got this bit of a saying as you know, I don't know who I'm going to be tomorrow. You know, I trust everyone and no one, least of all myself. No idea who I will be tomorrow. So, yeah, at the moment, Dermot Reeve is a man trying to live with addiction issues, you know, trying to remain clean, get his life, you know, back to a place that, that he can perhaps make himself feel a bit proud again of his behaviour, because, you know, there's been a lot of chaos in the last 20 years.
Is there a lot of guilt in Dermot Reeve these days?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I try and live without regret. I try and work on the philosophy of not living in the in the midbrain of stimulus, reaction, emotion, and actually try and choose my emotions, you know, trying to control my thoughts to rule my emotional state, I think is the most powerful thing in the universe. But putting it into practice, you know, I might be good at coaching it and talking about it, but doing it yourself, you know, it's like when I have a trigger of missing my children, you know, I don't want to feel sad and upset. So, you know, I used to visualize getting off the plane with the trolley with my bags and their smiling faces. You know, I take myself to a place in my thoughts, you know, projecting to something that might happen in the future that's exciting. So, you know, I've tried to use this philosophy with my addiction issues, and it might have science to back it up, but you know, in the end, I haven't managed to remain, you know, clean for long enough. I've had things occur in my life that, you know, where then I've been weak, you know, and I've used to escape my feelings by, if you like, by medicating.
What do you remember the day you first took drugs? I mean, it was a sliding doors moment, no doubt, because you'd managed to avoid it,
yeah,
for so long.
Yeah, and I had 2 years of being around it, you know, with other people having it on them or offering it, or, you know, it just became quite commonplace, if you like, in the circles that I was socialising in.
So this is
and
after
I had 2 years.
After you stopped playing?
After I stopped playing, yeah. After I stopped playing, and I might have been coaching Somerset at the time, and doing some TV with Channel 4. But, you know, I had 2 years of saying no.
And you drink at the time? You were.
I was I've never had a problem with alcohol. I've never enjoyed it or liked drinking. And
so you weren't.
I might have smoked a little bit of grass in Australia, you know, when I was younger. But in all integral purposes, the thing I'd been addicted to in my playing days was exercise. You know, I was a health nut. I was so keen on the fitness and doing boxing and also getting teams that I played into, you know, to train anaerobically and you know, train really hard. So, you know, I felt the benefits of it, having met a sports scientist. So I didn't get injured. I got more wickets, didn't get injured, got picked for England. It was really down to fitness. So it was, you know, a few years after I'd stopped playing that I decided, okay, you know, I'd sort of seen how other people had behaved on coke, and I thought, right, I'll give it a go. And, you know, and I felt, oh, look, I'm awake more. I'm awake for longer periods. So I'm having more conversations about making the world a better place. Or, you know, it's like you justified but I guess it made me feel whatever I was doing at the time was the right thing to do, or was okay. So, you know, the trouble with me and taking coke was, I liked it at the time and I could afford it, but 2 years later, it had completely, everything had spiraled to that place where I was doing 4 grams a day. I'm now ringing up, I can't get in the car to drive to work, so I'm ringing up and calling in sick. My world spiraled to that place where I thought, I got to get help.
Were there people around you telling you, there's a problem here? Did you have that? I mean, not that people listen, but were there people around you who could see what was happening?
There were a couple of people who went, you keep scratching your nose to it and you're touching your nose all the time, so. But yeah, no, life just was going, day after day, and for want of a better word, people talk about being a functioning alcoholic or a functioning addict. But, I had one spell where, I'd stayed up all night, and then I took and managed to get a hypnotic sleeping pill from my GP in Taunton. And I took this tablet, and, I ended up getting woken up by one of the crew in my hotel room going, "You're on the air, in 15 minutes. And chucked my clothes on, raced over to Lord's, and it was like I was in a hypnotic state. I did a whole day's commentary on England, New Zealand, and I don't remember it. I just remember one ball that I think Ashley Giles bowled that got caught out on the boundary. But, I was there commentating with Richie Benno and apparently doing my job, and I had no, recollection of that day. It was like I was sleepwalking in a trance, and I ended up, having a meltdown at the end of the day. And
what does a meltdown look like?
When psychosis hits because you've been doing it for too many days in a row and you've had no sleep, you end up, with feeling this fear of, an inability to talk and communicate, and a paranoia. Not a happy place, and that's when I guess you really do have a problem and you need to sort yourself out, because it's now really affecting your, it's a mind-altering substance, and it's now altered yours in a way. I remember once having to do the toss on the field, and my brain was scrambled at the time, and Steve I think, was walking out to do the toss, and I was there thinking, I can't even talk, I can't think, what am I going to say, and having this panic. And the stupidity of an addict is you go, if I do a line, it'll straighten me out, it'll make me feel better. But you've probably got too much in your system, and you're hitting a point of psychosis, but your brain's saying, do more. And what you need to do is just go to sleep for a day, but then you wake up with remembering the behaviors of what you've done. Conversations that you had that you don't remember. So, I'm sure there's a lot of people that I let down, that I need to apologize to, and, my behavior at that point was irrational. And although I never meant to hurt anybody or do bad things, etc., I'm sure my behavior was very inconsistent.
You missed out on the 2005 Ashes, which is still probably the most popular cricket's ever been in this country.
Yeah.
Maybe 1981, 2005, and I'm not sure we've ever really reached those heights again.
No.
But you had to move away from Channel 4 and the cricket. Was
in that season, I think I'd done the Bangladesh series. That's when I had that meltdown, and day's commentary. Well, it must have been in New Zealand, Bangladesh, New Zealand.
It was New Zealand 2004.
New Zealand 2004.
And then Bangladesh played 2 tests. Graham Thorpe's last test matches. I listened back. I found the highlights of that test match, the New Zealand test match.
Right.
Yeah. You can't tell. You're on it throughout. You can't tell. Where were you then when the cricket, because the playing career had been hugely successful, madly successful. The cricket commentary, just as. I mean, viewers now, or listeners, won't maybe realise how much angst there was at the time when the BBC lost the TV rights for the cricket. You know, everyone was up in arms. Adverts in the cricket.
Yeah.
You know, someone other than the BBC. When you look at cricket now, you must see things in place on Sky Sports Cricket, which started when.
Yeah,
I
think Channel 4 did a great job. You know, with the cricket, with their production, and it was really nice to be part of that, and to have a job, commentating on England matches. There's a lot of power there. You could, oh, what a wonderful shot by Hick, or you could actually go, oh, that's a very fortunate, quite a lucky innings, So, there is a responsibility that comes along with it, but what a position to be in, to be commentating on England matches as a boy who grew up in Hong Kong, that people thought wasn't very good at cricket, but managed to make my way as a player, and then as a captain at Warwickshire, we won more than anybody else. So I scored a great job down in Somerset as director of cricket, then tried to incorporate it with the commentary. But for me to sit next to Richie Benno and share a half hour's commentary stint, is I was blessed. But what happened was I ended up with a cocaine addiction that completely derailed that part of my life.
The cocaine made you doubt the worth of cricket commentary, didn't it? I mean, you're sitting next to Richie Benno at the headquarters of cricket, commentating on Test cricket. It's the pinnacle of the game, and it was back then, maybe not now. And you're sitting there thinking,
well, yeah, I mean, there's an expression that cocaine hijacks your soul, if you like, or steals your reality, because what ended up happening with me was, I became a bit of a philanthropist. I was sponsoring a whole village, which was ridiculous to think of that, but the money I was giving to World Vision every month, I was sponsoring a village. I was making money and giving it to children in need. It was getting doubled by John Timpson. It was like I was on a mission. I was getting bats signed all the time. I was going to the Sky commentary box. Can you sign, please? I get a bat. I do a dinner, auction it off, give the money to, the cobblers down in Taunton, Timpsons. They 2 years in a row, that cobblers raised more money than any shoe shop, any Timpsons in the whole of the country, because I was coming in with checks from dinners I was doing, and then John Timpson was doubling it. I bought a couple of baby units for Taunton Hospital, where I know Kevin Shine, his child, needed one of the incubators, and the lady said, "Oh, your coach bought this for us, donated it."
That must fill you with so much pride, though.
Yeah, well, yeah, but I lost my grounding. I was trying to form a charity called 100% for Kids, with Mick Jagger as patron. And then I thought, well, actually, if John Timpson's going to double everything I give, but yeah, I remember Chris Jagger writing in the Telegraph that my passion for cricket was only surpassed by my want to help the poor, or the and I've got a big tattoo on my back with the Buddha and Red Hot Chili Peppers symbol and the words "Give it away now," because I've always believed that if people, and it galls me to think that I call them digits in the sky, people's money is up in the clouds, they're just numbers. They're just numbers up there. They're not doing anything. You know, they're just up in the clouds, not doing anything, you know, and they're changing daily, etc. But, you know, we could be building wells in India for kids that need clean water, and, you know, orphanages. And so I felt I was on the spiritual quest, if you like, to make the world a better place, and persuade people that, you know, who've got money to give it away to those who don't. And if you don't have the money, then give away a smile, give away an energy. You know, you change the world if you put a smile on your face, say, good morning, hi. And you know, my life took a real turn that way when I had a ceremony performed on myself. This was before I'd ever done coke. You know, a Reiki master in the north of England, you know, she attuned me to do Reiki, and then I did level 2 Reiki. And, you know, I felt any hate I had for people, I just hated gone, and the place was, you know, it was the start of a spiritual journey, which unfortunately I then clouded a couple of years into that journey. You know, I clouded it with taking coke. If I could tell you one story, you know, on February the 7th in the year 2000, I went to see the Red Hot Chili Peppers, who I love, in Perth. So they're at the entertainment centre, 2,800 people, you know, in the stadium. But I went to the bar before the show started. I met this fella at the bar through this lady I was with. She knew him, a guy called Pete. And I just sensed a nice energy off this guy, Pete. I said, hi, and he went, hey, hi. And he said, do you like the Chili's? I said, oh, I love them. He said, were you at the big day out at the weekend? And I said, no, but I love them. He went, oh, mate, he said, it's great. He said, it starts off with Chad on the drums on his own. He said, he comes on, he plays a few beats. He said, he threw a drumstick at the big day out. He said, he threw a drumstick. He said, my mate next to me caught it in midair, like that. He said, and the whole place erupted. He said, it was amazing. Anyway, nice to meet you. So a quarter of an hour later, I'm in my seat in the entertainment centre. And just like this guy Pete had said, house lights are up. Chad Smith comes on, plays a bit of Queen, Rolling Stones, a few famous drum beats, throws a drumstick. It goes about 70 yards to the back of the mosh pit, where a hand catches it, swings round, and we look at each other. Pete caught the drumstick. He told me the story quarter of an hour later of his... And then I found out later that Pete's actually a level 2 Reiki healer. So, you know, I call that an amazing coincidence.
Yeah.
You know, at rehab, one of the therapists, you know, she used the word God incidents. You know, that when things like that occur, and I have to tell you that, you know, and it's going to sound a bit fruity to some people, but I've had things in my life, this was before I did coke, I had things in my life occur that make me know that there's some forces, you know, at play in the universe that, so, you know, I don't have any trouble with now working in the fellowship with, you know, going to meetings that, you know, trusting to a higher power or trying to pass your trust over to a higher power, whatever it might be. I have no problem knowing that there's something that's been guiding me, not always perhaps in the right way, or I haven't made the right choices for sure. But I think at the heart of Dermot Reeve, there's a spiritual uneasiness, because although I've experienced things, I'm not sure why me, and what am I meant to do with it. And yes, it might make an interesting book, but, you know, I ran down that road of being, one of a better word, a spiritual warrior, of, you know, trying to look for the answers to the big questions in life, I guess. You know, and I did experience things and see things that defy, rational explanation or scientific explanation. So,
did you find life easier before you retired, before you turned to drugs? Did you find the game easy? Was your upbringing easy?
My upbringing,
or were your addictions and obsessions healthier?
well, yeah, I guess as a teenager or as a young man, I was addicted to, I was a lust addict. Now, is lust a positive emotion or a negative emotion? You look at a girl and go, "Oh, isn't she pretty?" And you get a little kick of lust.
I suppose.
I had that as an addiction.
So whether it's detrimental to your life and others around you, I guess. One way of looking at it.
I think it was a positive emotion until I got married.
Yeah.
Because then, if you're looking out the car window and you're seeing another woman and appreciating her beauty, your wife's not going to like that. So, I religiously, when I was in Queenstown, stopped producing lust. Okay, so if I noticed an attractive woman or whatever, I would look away, and I would look at the trees and go, "Oh, look at those trees," and I stopped producing the peptide or the protein and giving myself a fix of lust regularly, which I'd done previously, and I ended up absolutely changing my personality. I would then not notice women, or if I looked at a woman, nothing, I wouldn't get that kick anymore. So, controlling your thoughts to rule your emotional state. Everybody out there is an addict to their emotion, to their emotional state. If you feel an emotion on a daily basis, you get angry on a daily basis. If something happens, someone cuts you off in the car and you get angry and you produce the anger emotion, it goes into your bloodstream and docks on your universe of cells, and they all get, a lot of them get a hit of that anger and they split and form new cells. So you've actually got a universe of cells going every day going, "Give me a bit of anger." So perhaps Buddhist monks who live in the frontal lobe of creation by meditating and connecting, I guess, with their higher power, perhaps their pituitary gland gets stimulated, perhaps it evolves and gets larger and more powerful, and perhaps they're feeling an emotion when they're meditating that I've never felt yet, or we don't feel. Maybe that is the power of the life that they lead. So,
but from that enlightenment, this is the constant dilemma, isn't it? The contrast in your life, it seems. So you could have this awareness and...
Well, Buddha, I think, had 4 kids, but he left them to go and meditate in a monastery, and you look and think, well, he's not doing anything. But, I guess he's seeking enlightenment, or the messages and this is one of the things I've had this dilemma with in my spiritual quest is, Buddhists would just say, it's not your place to put it onto other people, or just keep your head down and just go through life, and but if I end up in a monastery at some point in the future, if that's where my life ends up taking me, I don't really have any fear of that. I might rather be in Queenstown on a nice golf course.
Well, golf course it is.
With the membership that I've got, but yeah, it's been a hell of a journey, and it's actually been really, just talking about it now and opening up has been it's given me actually a good feeling, because I've become very isolated and introverted and stopped communicating with and messaging people and friends, and and I have been in a place in the last year which has been dark and depressing. So
when the end came at Channel 4, why wasn't that a line in the sand, or was it? Is there lots of lines in the sand? Is there a line in the sand now?
I think, you get taught that, it's just for today. It's just about staying clean for today. Just easy does it, just for today. But, I also need to get out there in the real world, get, speaking at dinners if I can, or commentating, or working on a book. But, the first time I went to rehab after Channel 4, I knew I needed to save my marriage. So I stopped taking anything, the week before I went to rehab. And then when I got to rehab, they told me, step one, you're powerless. And I couldn't get my head round. Well, no, I was thinking, no, I've got the power. I chose to do it, which might not have been a very good thing to do, and it got out of hand, but now I'm choosing to stop. So, and I stopped a week ago before I came in. So, I've got the power to choose to. But what's become evident over time with me is that, your life becomes uncontrollable when you're taking. When I've taken cocaine, and the last sort of meltdown 9 months ago, I gambled online, which is another addictive behavior I have, which had been going on for a couple of years. But, suddenly when I took cocaine, I lost control of my behavior, if you like. And, I ended up blowing all my wife and I's, life savings, just in the space of a few days.
There was a build up to that, though, wasn't there? It's not like everything was hunky dory and then you just went.
No.
Spend.
Yeah, I guess.
You don't have to go into the details, but you were forced into, you were backed into a corner in some ways, or you certainly gone through a very tough period of life before this.
Yeah. For sure. I still love my wife dearly. I've still got my wedding ring on, but we're not together. But she's had her mental health issues. But that's not an excuse.
Was there a codependency in your relationship, do you think?
Yeah, and we both realise now that
so when
we're not good for each other, and she's, I was trying to care for her, and keep things together, and we had a couple of dogs, we were renting a house, and there was a routine in our life, and
so when her routine went, that had a knock-on effect to you, I guess.
Yeah. I'm still probably grieving the fact that my third marriage has ended. It was, was married to Nicola for 5 years. She's a very spiritual lady, but at times she's lost her grounding. She's quite brilliant with her mind and with numbers, and she calls it sort of gifted autism, sort of, she feels she has. But, I'll never forget a moment with Nicola where she handed me, it was one of the first times we've met, she handed me her tarot cards. And I'd never seen tarot cards in my life or touched them. And she said, pick one for me. So I did a little sort of protective bubble around myself and tried to connect, if you like. And then I passed these tarot cards from one hand to the other with my eyes shut. And then I passed one card, and it was as heavy as a mobile phone. I thought I'd passed like the whole pack by mistake. And I opened my eyes, and it was just one card. But for that brief moment, and on my life, that card, somehow the universe put pressure on that. And that made me be the one, that was the one obviously I chose.
What card was it?
I can't remember what it's called. It's something as swords. It's the one with the lady, she's got the blindfold on, and there's a puddle in front of her. And it had very distinct meaning to Nicola, who, you know, you can take the blindfold off and you could just step over the puddle, and to follow what's in front of you, which was me. So it gave her, I think, some, you know, positivity towards getting involved in a relationship with me.
How would your teammates have described you, do you think, back in the day?
My teammates,
How would the superstars
bit
have?
of a no. I think they would describe me as a bit of a loner, very analytical. You know, giving the game the attention to detail it deserves. Someone who believes very much in energy and, you know, emotions and positivity. You know, at Warwickshire, when I became captain, you know, whether you had a cap, a first team cap or second team, those things went out the window. We all became equal. There was no more knocking on the dressing room door for the young fellas. So, you know, creating an environment of equality, I think was a big thing for the success at Warwickshire. So young guys would come in the side like Dougie Brown and Ashley Giles, Wazim Khan, and they'd feel, you know, right at home sort of straight away. So, but yeah, I mean, one of my nicknames was Marmite as a cricketer because, you know, Marmite, you either love it or you hate it. So, you know, I was intensely disliked by opposition teams because they were the opposition. And if I was out there and I could say something to get inside the batsman's head, you know, one of my tricks was if they had a debutant playing for Hampshire, a young fella called John making his debut, if he came in at number 10, I would be calling him Jack, you know. Has anyone seen Jack play in the second team? You know. Has anyone played against Jack before? I'd just be calling him the wrong name, you know. And time and again, you know, you'd get they eventually turn around and go, "My name's John," and you think, and we'd all have a giggle, but you know, so I wasn't liked by the opposition. You know, I was given a hard time by Ian Botham when I first played it as a 20-year-old, and I'd played out in Australia as an Englishman, as a POM in Perth for 9 seasons, and you know, you get given so much stick and verbals just because you're English. So, but yeah, no, I played it hard on the field. I remember Robin Smith, when on an England tour, actually saying to me, "You're actually quite a nice guy. You like, you throw balls and you encourage and you know, but to play against you, oh, you're a real, you know, beep beep." So
Robin Smith was another guy that you played with that had, I mean, he still continues to have real difficulties.
yeah,
Chris Lewis,
Yeah.
another guy. Is that just coincidence, do you think? Or do you think the game attracts a certain type of person that when the game comes to an end?
you could also go into suicides in cricket.
Yeah.
With, you know, there's a lot of suicides in cricketers and ex-cricketers, and
Why?
so I don't know. I obviously don't have those answers, but I think, you know, when you spend, you know, you play a 4-day game and you're on the field for 6 hours with 10 mates, and you've got this environment.
Well, you've got a structure as well, haven't you? Your life
Yeah.
has a structure enforced on you.
It then ends, doesn't it?
And it ends like that.
You know, you're injured and you're 32 or 34 and you've got an injury, boom, it's gone. You've lost that routine, you've lost that. And perhaps you've lost that adrenaline of you know, winning a NatWest final or, you know, a close run chase. So that makes you, you know, you win the game, and for that moment it feels fantastic and you get that buzz.
That natural high.
That natural high. So maybe after, when that's gone, you might be tempted by unnatural highs.
Were you enlightened when you were a player? I mean, you talk about spirituality and the Buddhism and the... Was that part of your life when you were playing cricket?
Oh, you know, there might have been times when I suddenly stopped the game and went and moved the player just in one spot, and the next ball went there. You know, that you might have thought, oh, where's that come from? That bit of advice. I bleed in energy. You know, I could be bowling, you know, and Alan Donald might run up and give me a whack on the bum and go, "Come on, Skip," and I'd suddenly feel all this energy that suddenly came to me, and I could feel it. If we lost, you know, the opposition coming off the field and you're shaking hands with them, you know, in a way felt like I could feel their joy, or I could definitely feel, you know, things buzzing. And I've had odd, bizarre moments where I might have walked up to someone, well, I did in a nightclub in Australia, and I just said, "You're going to have a son and call him Peter." It just came out, and I was like, who am I to tell this lady what she's going to call her son? And she went, no, I already have a son called Peter. So, you know, when I was in Goa, I met a lady, Emily, from the Midlands, and she was talking about her grandparents, you know, and I just went, Frank and Dorothy. And the grandparents were called Frank and Dorothy. But then I go, oh, I've got an Uncle Frank, and Dorothy's an old name, isn't it? So I try and rationalize why, you know, I had those moments or those things sort of occurred.
Right at the start, I said to you, you know, who is Dermot Reeve? And you said, I don't know, it could be different to today and tomorrow, you know.
Yeah, that was just, I got on an aeroplane one point in my life and I meditated, and I've never been good at English, but I just got on the plane and I meditated and I just, or channeled, and I got a bit of paper out and I wrote, it's dealing with thoughts that is everybody's inner war. Nobody knows anybody perfectly, and as a result, we live the complications. We are all taught, and therefore no one truly knows their right from wrong. Every path different and so many choices. We use words like lifestyle and society, but there is no normal behavior. I indulge in chaos to have moments of heaven. I trust everyone and no one, least of all myself. No idea who I will be tomorrow. We have a beautiful son, and I thank the angels every day. Hopefully he will be a good man, his own man. Am I good? Is harmony possible between men and women when they live together? I fear not. Compromise, I hear scoffed down my throat, but what of the fear? Take away the fairy tale, and with it goes the fear. Accept your duty, soldier. Fuck you. Who will you be tomorrow? And that just came out, and I've never changed a word. And it might just sound like a bit of a break-up sort of poem. And I've had a couple of incidences with, if you like, with, for want of a better expression, channeling or asking for some guidance. And when I was in India years ago, I got the paper out, and I've never changed a word, but I wrote, if you don't mind, I'll do it for you now. It's a bit of what I like to call now a recovery rap, but I wrote, the woman on the cocaine helpline hung up on me when I said, I did meet the Red Hot Chili Peppers in Amsterdam. That seemed a good thing, in answer to her statement, no good happens with Charlie. It was hard to believe at the time. He was becoming my best friend, hiding away in my little pocket, ready to be released in my brain and cause havoc. It's like the bad boy from your subconscious is awakened. Sleep, says the conscious. Porn, says the doctor. I call him that because he's always right. But he'll sleep through the guilt tomorrow while Mr. Conscious repeats 100 times a minute, why? Then he goes completely schizo and says, get some more. Maybe you can control it this time. Then I got bored, so I wrote, well, the doctor says it makes you more creative, makes you more spiritual, makes things more meaningful. But really you're tainted, wasted, late for everything. What's the name of that band? Shut up, Conscious. Subby's here, mate, the doctor. I might be dumber than you, but I'm stronger. Don't reprogram me, I'll be here for longer. Always the winner, the grin of the sinner, no need for dinner. wow, you're looking thinner, only cost you 20 grand. All you did was exercise your hand. You've lost your wife, your kids, and time. What to do? Let's do another line. No, come on, mate. Let's do another line. No, gong. Because now I realize I need to be clean, to accept the ability of my pituitary to grant me the serenity that's within me. This is not a maybe. It all lies in the power of the wisdom of the spectrum of your creation, powered by your intention. Truth, love, joy, wonderful, fantastic, can all be yours for free. No need for university. It's just in the universe, you see. It's a choice, medicate or meditate.
Do you think you will medicate again?
Hey?
Do you think you'll medicate again?
No, I absolutely hope not. Yeah. I mean, I've got a sugar, you know, if you want a better way of saying it, I've probably got a sugar addiction and I'm pre-diabetic. But I guess a little bit of sugar is not, you know, compared to...
Tell me about your sugar addiction. Tell me about your sugar addiction.
Yeah, you know, bar of chocolate, bar of peppermint arrow by the bed at night, every night. And I'll try and get off to sleep and, you know, I have a few, break off a little bit of it, sort of last thing before I go to sleep. And I get that moment of, you know, of loving that taste of the chocolate and get the serotonin fix or hit just from that bit of chocolate. It's something I look forward to. But, you know, then I'll find myself 2 hours later waking up, you know, my brain's woke me up because it knows that there's still chocolate there and I haven't finished it. So I'll break off another 4 pieces and put that in my mouth and eat that. You know, and I wake up in the morning, I got a bit of chocolate dribbling down my beard. Yeah. So my behaviours aren't hugely healthy at the moment and at my age, but, you know, I bowled a lot of overs. I had a good run there for a while as a cricketer and a sportsman, and I still believe my mind's sharp, and I do love, you know, in my time out in Australia not too long ago, I was coaching Cameron Green, you know, the Australian cricketer. He was one of my colts at Subi when we won the flag. But sadly, you know, physically it's been difficult for me to continue coaching, and I decided to come back to the UK to be with Nicola, to be with my wife and dogs. But
how are you going to get your kids back?
I just have to, for the moment, you know, try and choose acceptance over frustration. You know, I went to Sydney and I didn't behave well for a few days on my last visit to see them.
So how many, a few years ago? Or?
About 3 years ago, yeah.
And
as soon as I got a little bit of money, I was in Perth coaching. Before the season started, I flew over to Sydney to see them. And, you know, whether it was my nerves a bit of seeing them or being in Sydney is a very emotional place, or is it the fact I know a dealer? But, you know, I hadn't had anything for a long time, and, you know, I went to Sydney and...
How long was a long time? Are we talking years?
Yeah, a few years.
So you hadn't...
I've had long periods of sobriety, and, you know, trying to get my life back on track. You know, I might have started smoking a few roll-ups, which I've stopped now.
Roll-up cigarettes or weed?
Yeah, roll-up cigarettes. No, I haven't had any, you know, smoked any weed for donkey's years. But...
So you hadn't seen your children for a number of years?
Yeah, because
you
of
hadn't
COVID.
Taken anything for a number of years?
Yeah.
And then you're going to Sydney, you're flying from Perth, you land in Sydney from Perth.
I go on the midnight horror.
The overnight, yeah.
Overnight, so I've had no sleep. I want to stay awake to see the kids. and I went and got some speed, and then didn't sleep for 3 or 4 days. And when I could have seen them on Father's Day morning, I couldn't get out of bed. And when I checked my phone, there was no message saying Happy Father's Day, so I didn't even ring them. I got stubborn and thought, you haven't even messaged me Happy Father's Day. And I knew I couldn't spend the day with them because there's a new man and they were having a family thing. But my behavior was just, totally out of order. And, my second daughter, she just sent me the message I got on Father's Day was, I'm done with you. And that's been pretty heartbreaking to be dealing with the last few years, because
well, she's hurt, right? She's lost her dad that she had that relationship with, I guess, and she's angry.
Yeah, I mean, when I split up with Fiona, my second wife, at that time, it probably wasn't good for me to be around if I was using or having issues with drugs at that point. But I do distinctly remember when I handed the house over to her and wrote we did a settlement, and I gave her basically everything. I remember, part of my brain was going, good, because you're not going to be able to stop until you run out of money. So was I pushing myself towards that point of well, I've got no money, I haven't got any money, I can't get drugs and gamble. Makes it a heck of a lot easier. But I remember saying to Fiona, you've just become a millionairess, and smiling. But I got 3 kids in Sydney, living on 6 acres, and hopefully one day it'll get passed down to them. But they've had, I haven't been there for them, and I wish I could have been. And it's been, heartbreaking to be in India trying to work and make a living. I had one season where I did go back to Sydney and coach Blacktown just to be near them, but it wasn't particularly satisfying or gratifying. Just catching up with them like once a week for a meal on a Friday, and then they've got to go back. They go back to the house, and you're stuck on your own again. It was.
Do you need people around you, or are you quite happy on your own?
I'm quite happy on my own. But I do enjoy now, the interaction with, people. At the moment, I'm living in supported housing in Portsmouth. So it's a share house of addicts who are all clean. We get drug tested once a week. But, there's a few people. It's good that I'm in a house with other people, not totally on my own. Because, that tendency to isolate and become very introverted and just not communicate with the outside wall, and that's not a healthy way to be living. So.
And how are you financially? How are you supporting yourself? I mean, how are you getting by? How are you affording your peppermint aero?
Yeah, that's probably one of my little treats. No, at the moment, I'm living off £6 a day.
Wow.
Yeah, and the rest of any housing benefit goes straight to the, the company called, I forgot what they're called now, but the supported housing fellowship that, and I can stay there for up to 2.5 years, provided I stay clean. But it's also time. It's time to get back out there in the real world and get the mic in my hand and get commentating on England matches. Hopefully, or find a bit of work doing dinner speaking. something I've been working on, which is actually now called Commentary from the Heavens, because all the commentators that I used to, you know, Richie and Johners and Fred and Tony Gregg, they're all passed over now.
So before you join them in, you know, however many decades from now, how is, well, when the question's asked, who is Dermot Reeve in 10 years' time, what's the answer going to be then?
One of the reasons I'm doing this, if you like, besides trying to perhaps get a little bit of exposure and show that I'm healthy and hopefully still articulate, is, you know, the message, you know, whether I could go around other sporting clubs or whether I get into schools. But, you know, I think I've got quite a powerful story. You know, I'm someone who's gone from, you know, having a fantastic job commentating on the television, you know, earning good money and, you know, had 7 houses, etc. And now you've got nothing because you've had addiction issues and you know, substance and gambling issues. So, you know, if I can stop one person, you know, if there's anyone out there who's watching this and you get tempted by being offered some coke, don't try it, please. Okay, if that gets one, if I can get the message out there, if that ends up being part of my legacy that I tried to help, you know, that's a nice thing to do. I guess in the fellowship, we call it sort of service.
And I suppose the other hope is that your children, as they get older, they realise that not to take it personally, I imagine, because addiction is something that they will encounter in other walks of life, you'd imagine.
The wonderful thing is that the kids are happy and healthy and they've turned into really, you know, wonderful human beings and adults. And, you know, part of me just wanted to give them perhaps a bit better advice or knowledge than perhaps I was told, you know, being taught by my dad about Catholicism, or, you know, how do you know there's a God? He'd say, I just know, I have faith. But, you know, for me, I felt like doors got opened into that world or connecting, and it can be a dangerous place. It can be a very dangerous place to go down. I think half the people in mental institutions are there because of spiritual reasons or spiritual unrest. So, you know, to dabble in that world is probably not. I'm not sure whether it's you know, it's an advisable thing, and but trying to still give away a message of, you know, I had one ex-girlfriend, Nicole, who at one point in her house, when I was channeling, a candle lit, and I was telling that story of having to give up this girl, Nicole, who was sexy, vivacious and funny, and we had a connection, but I had to give her up to have a child with Fiona. And I ended up telling that story to a woman in Perth that I met for the first time. 10 minutes after meeting her, I was telling her the story of Nicole and the candle and having to give up Nicole, and I was telling it to her first cousin in Perth. You know, and then, you know, years later I got back in touch with Nicole just to see how she was, and she said, thank you so much, thank you. You were my messenger. You were the messenger that put me on a right path or a spiritual path. So, you know, that was one good instance of a relationship in the past, because, you know, a lot of them have been, say, powerful, but they end and I move on. And I've always tried to sort of go forward in life, but I'm very celibate at the moment at my age. Yeah. And with my health.
Dermot, thank you.
Thanks very much. Enjoyed it.